was just, for an like 17, 18-year-old kid, it just seemed like a really cool profession.
Right.
And really about being a paramedic, like a lot of paramedics, like that, it's like that identity piece almost. And so, when you're there, how do I contribute the most? How do I grow the most? How do I get the most out of the career that I can? And it's just take opportunities like when they become available. Push yourself up outside of your comfort zone.
Jeremy Watts, everyone.
Yay! Woo-hoo! Chief Watts.
I think so Jeremy Watts. So I've been with York since 2002. I started my career in York as a primary care paramedic. I've been a superintendent in operations in our service quality unit. I worked on our special response unit for a bit. I've been the deputy chief of our support arm, and then I did about 7 years for COVID as the deputy chief of operations. And then coming up to about a year, I've been in the acting chief role with York, and it's been awesome. It's been great.
Well, thank you for being here today. Let me give you a background of sort of how this came to be.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I was scheduled for a shift here, and Ryan's like, "Come into the boardroom with me," and I'm like, "Okay." Right? I just blindly trusted him. And then I came in here and there's all these cameras set up and he's like, "We're going to do a podcast." I'm like, "No, what do you mean?" And so what we did is basically for like 43 minutes, we just yelled at each other and talked about medicine and clinical, and we bickered back and forth. And it caught the attention of some of our paramedics as a way of, clinical information or questions that have come up in a fun way for them to listen to.
Yeah.
Oftentimes I've heard, "Hey, when I drive into work, I listen to one of our podcasts," and it was great. We had a lot of fun. Since then, he's turned to professional. So now you've had a number of physicians, experts in their field come in, and now, he's just addicted to being a camera. So I want to say, was it 2 or 3 months ago, we were in the hallway, and I said, "I love that you're doing a lot of the clinical stuff and that you had, you're branching out, but I think that we should do a leadership side." And you're like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, being a paramedic isn't just about, entitled values and how you are intervening in the community clinically. It's about, are you engaged in the work that you're doing? And part of that comes from the organization that you work in and the leaders that are developing." And I thought, there is no better person than Chief Watts. And he's like, "Great idea." And bam, the next thing you know,
I'm here.
you're here.
You got it here.
So yay,
Yeah.
thank you for doing it. So I just wanted to give everybody sort of the background on why, because, we're the clinical body. That makes sense. But we need to also appreciate all the things that go into making a paramedic. And seeing a paramedic through their career, it's not just the medicine, it's not just the clinical, but it's also what you do.
Yeah, it's a little bit. No, I think I'm so happy to be here. I think that my career and sort of myself as a paramedic and my time in paramedicine has been touched with the base hospital. I spent over 10 years as a working for the base hospital as one of their part-time facilitators. But I think just the partnership, so having a really good partnership between the service and the base hospital, I think it's all encompassing.
Right.
And so having the opportunity to come in and to chat on some of my learning and just really where I'd love to see the industry go and how do we, best support folks and how do we best encourage and mentor. Ultimately, it just helps us deliver the best care, but also we just get a lot more enjoyment out of work when everyone feels good, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really important part, and the reason, that alignment piece between the service and between the paramedic and between the base hospital and the regulator and bring it all in, we all have a little sort of piece to play, right? In everyone's development and everyone's ultimate success, right? So, no, it's great.
That was amazing. And just talking to everyone, getting your background, and even when I just met you, the same pattern has emerged. Amazing paramedic, still clinical, amazing leader, family man, and down to earth. And everyone knew you were going to strive for excellence as soon as they met you. So I'm happy you're here too. And that's a good example that we can set for York and all the paramedics in the catchment area in the route.
So did you always want to be a medic? Is this like a little boy dream and I wanted to be...
You know what? I think it was coming near the end of high school. My mom worked she worked at York Finch Hospital in the OR for like 40 something years. And so I remember having the opportunity to visit her at work, to go to, the take your kid to work day. I knew I wanted to be in that medicine sort of field. And then progressing through high school, like same thing. I did lifeguarding, like a lot of, paramedics get their start in that, and just really enjoyed it. And then, looking at the opportunities, I really just wanted to see what it would be like to be a paramedic. It was just, for an like 17, 18-year-old kid, it just seemed like a really cool profession.
Right.
And it just started from there. And then loved the role, loved the job. Loved everything really about being a paramedic. Like a lot of paramedics, like that, it's like that identity piece almost. And so, when you're there, how do I contribute the most? How do I grow the most? How do I get the most out of the career that I can? And it's just take opportunities, like when they become available. Push yourself up outside of your comfort zone. Yeah. So that's a long way to answer. I wasn't always thinking about being a paramedic when I was a kid, but it like, every decision kind of like pushes you in a certain direction. And for me, it's, obviously one of the best decisions my life that I've made. Really
You've done okay.
enjoy it.
You've done okay.
Yeah, I've done okay. I've done okay. I mean, I think, certainly, it's a very challenging career. Like, all the paramedics that are watching this will have their own stories. There's still, I haven't been, like really like frontline clinical. It's been well over a decade now. Like I've certainly tried to stay as connected as I can. But yeah, there's still, like, regardless if you're the chief or the deputy or you're like a first year paramedic, you still, those different stories, they still come up, and it can still bother, and you have to figure out how to work through it. And it is a part of your story. Right. So I think that's one of the things, that I'm really happy to have done, is not only sort of see the evolution of paramedicine in this area and in this province, but just how we've started to gain a much better understanding of how do we support each other and how to keep the workforce well. And that's that, whether it's from the individual paramedic, that resilience piece, or if it's from from a service level or from the base hospital. Like I said, in the last sort of section, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
And so how we evolve to supporting folks through their whole career, whatever that twists and turns might look like, it all comes back to resilience. It all comes back to well-being. We just did our professional development day. We did an engagement with basically almost all the paramedics and even almost all of our staff at the York. And the one thing that really stands out is, if our workforce isn't well, none of this other stuff matters. You can't innovate. You can't do those things. So, like, to me, the big thing that's made the biggest difference is from where I started and how we dealt with folks that were exposed. And I think about some of the calls that I did. I was lucky. Like, we had almost like no supports. There was a lot we didn't understand about around occupational stress injuries and the impact that it has but like that, changes your brain. And so even just understanding that now, we've come a long way. We still have a long way to go, but I think it's, one of the most important innovations is just how we better understand, like, the impacts of trauma on our people. So.
Right. And supporting them through that. So Ryan and I are not paramedic chiefs. I'm not sure if you're aware.
Yeah.
So you are. What kind of challenges are you, like, what comes with this job? What are the challenges that you see that we wouldn't see, and that the 1,800 paramedics listening are not, that's not their life, that's not their daily life? Like, what are you working on right now?
So I'll almost take it back. I remember, being my partner, being in an ambulance, being frustrated with the service, like, what are these guys doing? And so, like, I remember that experience, and I'm sure that still happens now. Like, I'm under no false hope that doesn't. And I think the one thing that, as the more opportunities I get to experience more senior roles or just be exposed to more of the context of the way where paramedics work, is we're part of a really big machine. And so the biggest jump and the biggest change that I've noticed in almost a year that I've been the chief is that there's a lot of no-win situations. And so what I mean by that is that the healthcare system is stretched, the political and the economic environment is stretched, I would say that the collective mental health of like our country or the world coming out of COVID is stretched, and so no one has the best decisions and or the right necessarily the best ones or the right ones. So what I would say is like the more exposure I get, the more you recognize that making some of these decisions is really challenging. And so if I think back to myself sitting on the ambulance and being frustrated, like I would have gone back, I would have asked more questions. I would have been curious. I would have been like, what's going on? Like, why, I'm curious why we're going there. And so for me, understanding how decisions impact the folks that are ultimately the ones the closest to the community, and trying to learn and trying to balance from that. And, is like the biggest learning I've had this year. Some things I've got right, some things I haven't, but it's all like, nothing's written in stone.
Right.
So, I think just how we evolve and trying to provide folks that are there day and night doing that there is more that is in the background, there is a bigger story and a bigger picture, and answering those questions is really hard to do. But yeah, that's for me been my biggest thing.
And I think what's really, and just to give some insight, what's great about you is that you are approachable. And so our paramedics approach you in the hallways. There's not a nervousness with you. And they can't ask the questions if you're not willing to engage, and you are. You're safe to ask, and that's important too. Thank you for that. That's excellent. Do you have
I was just thinking about the human side of that. Just, you have almost 1,000 people reporting to you. And you get millions of questions. You got your own duties, problems that are almost unsolvable at some scales. Then you go home and be on again with your family, 4 kids, right?
Yeah.
Does that take a toll?
Oh, absolutely. I find like the role of chief, it's interesting. You want to understand the work, but I actually find my role is I have to make sure that the folks senior in the organization or the municipality, in the province, those that like hold the purse, those that hold really control over like the regulatory piece, that they really understand the impact that this work has on paramedics, how the impact that paramedics have on the community. And like, I think that's I think that I live in the, I like all paramedics do this last week. So we, when we're filming this over the last week, there's, we're kind of coming out of that big ice storm. A lot of our folks and a lot of folks in a lot of the services, came to work really busy. Work was, much more stressful, issues with CACs going down and not being able to communicate. And then they go home. They don't have power. They have kids. They have aging parents. They have that. I would say the biggest challenge is I don't know how to balance it. It is that, and we all have struggles. Like everybody totally does. And then just on one of the things that Tamara you just said is around, that I'm safe, and maybe I'm not for everybody. And so I think the one thing that drives me nuts is when you go into a training or thing, and it's like, oh, this is a safe space. It's not for me to decide. It's like, it's for me to try and be as like a leader or a consistent person. And then you decide if I'm safe for you. Like all I can do is try and provide as much insight, provide as much of a space or opportunity to folks to engage. Ultimately, and the other thing too with that, it's okay if we don't agree. Like, it's okay if we don't agree. Like, you can bring, some, concerns forward, or why are we doing this? And I can kind of give my approach or my rationale or my understanding and sort of how we got here. And at the end of the day, it's okay if you don't agree with my decision, or it's okay if I don't necessarily agree with some of your rationale. And that's okay. And I think one of the things that, and I imagine we'll chat about it a bit, but like, if there was like a magic wand that I would love to see a workforce that is trauma exposed like paramedics and works in like really weird environments and time, that if we could communicate better and if we could have really productive conflict. I think that that's one of the things throughout my career. If I look at the things that really bothered me, was not having the ability to have really productive conflict and deal with that stuff, because that's the stuff that stays with you. And like I said, all of us are human. Like we're human, whether you've done a really bad call this week, or like myself, there's stuff from 20 years ago that I still think about. And especially once I had kids and you start to like, the world changes. And so that stuff stays with everybody, and everybody, Everybody has good days, everybody has bad days. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if I'm a chief or a deputy chief or frontline first year paramedic. Like, at the end of the day, we're all people, right? So it's hard to make connections with 1,000 people, though. So it's trying to create those opportunities and the rest. That's the one thing I found really hard.
So I'm just thinking, like, at that scale of a job, you probably assume a bunch of stuff's going to go wrong every day. Like, just from things we can't control, like the ice foot. Like, how do we control that? And the guy have to deal with it. And how do I support the paramedics, even if they feel the support or not?
Yeah.
Like, that's a hard job.
Well, you know what? I find having a good barometer, so trying to create, like I said, opportunities for folks to give feedback or to ask questions. I've really spent a long time. I think one of the most underutilized resource, and this goes back to historical compliment. I mean, I'm wearing a white shirt today, and I know some services have gone all blue, but that divide between white shirts and blue shirts in our industry, don't know if that's helped us. And I think because for a paramedic on the front line who's dealing with an operational challenge or an issue, the best support that they have, because they're not probably going to get me, they're going to have like really good superintendent. And so we have to build up that frontline leadership and have them be able to align all the way top to bottom. And I think that whether it's, everyone on the management team, we're all going to have different ideas of success. We're all going to have that. But if you get a relatively consistent customer service experience from all of your leaders, I think that's how the organization gets to there. So I'm not going to be able to help 1,000 people today, but Tamara, who has like 25 that she really cares about, she wants to see their success, she wants to see how they work, she is available for them. And then that's it. And so Tamara needs to feel supported from above, that she can go out and do those things. And I think that in the past, at least in our organization, the frontline superintendent role or the frontline supervisor role historically has been a very transactional one. And I don't think that going forward, when we have services expanding and the volumes expanding and the staffing numbers expanding, I don't think that you can really continue on that the chief's making all these decisions. And I don't think that is long-term success or supports that. So, and I really think that folks need to have really good support from their frontline leaders, but feel safe to kind of connect with whomever in the organization. And then we all relatively give the same level of customer service from the leadership.
So correct me if I'm hearing correctly, because this resembles your leadership strategy. It's very transformational and it's like, we'll flip the hierarchy. I'm going to support you because I know you can help these people, and I'll support everyone else. And that means instead of just coming from the top, working down, because it is an impossible task to delegate to 1,000 people, right?
I think everybody on the leadership team, they have to have like a natural style though. So for everybody, that it may not be the same as mine, and that's okay. And I do think that some decisions need to be very structured. This is the way that we need to go, and here's the reasons why. And you get to ask that question a lot. People want to understand the why, and you do your best to be able to articulate that. But like for me, like a frontline leader, like I'm not going to be there on the weekend, probably, right? So you have to feel safe making a decision, and that maybe it's the right one, maybe it's not. We've all made those not great ones, and we have to figure it out. I've done a few doozies, and I don't know, I'm still the chief, right? So it's okay. I think that's how you approach that piece. But I think is I'm a big believer in role modelship, and so if the chief goes around and it is, I'm gonna have bad days, for sure. But if I try and be as relatively steady as I can be, if I make sure that I'm giving sort of an equitable space for people to sort of bring concerns and things forward, then that piece should flow through. And we did a lot of work, really tried to dive in when we were doing our work around violence against paramedics. And I remember following up, so there was some crews, this is when I'm still in the deputy chief of ops role. So we had some crews that had some experiences around abuse and violence. And so I started reaching out to them, just what it was. And so some of the things that I noticed in that is our paramedics that are persons of color, our female paramedics, were certainly experiencing these issues at much higher rates than the rest of the service. And so asking questions like, what do we need to do? And all of a sudden it was, we need better training, we need better equipment, we need dispatch to know what we're doing, we need the police to be better. And it was so we started evolving that work. And then from that, we had a position statement we put in place around, we needed like something to anchor this to. And so part of that work that we did and we communicated was that, you know, if it matters to you, it matters to us. And if you're bringing forward a concern around abuse or violence or other stuff to your leader and you're not getting a customer service response for them, the suits have, and those commanders have leaders. I have a lot of bosses. So if I'm not meeting your customer service expectations, you know, you can do it. And I get, we're, you know, it's what we just talked about. It's not on for us to determine whose space is safe or not. But it's trying to have that like consistent approach that, and then making everyone aware and like that we're all accountable for our own actions and our own behaviors. And my other piece too that I think is really important is that shared responsibility. So I think that leaders have a lot of responsibility, and I think the paramedics have a lot of responsibility for their development, for their like approach to the work. Like it's not just a sort of top down, this is what we're going to do, but like everyone has that shared responsibility piece. So advocate for yourself, advocate for your peer. Those are a lot of the things. But if you don't have a good structure that makes it known that customer service from leaders is a really important part of the organization, then it's hard to follow.
So let me ask you, you were hired in 2002.
Yes.
2025 now. What are what challenges are our paramedics facing now? Maybe that are a little bit different from before.
Yeah. I mean, I had as a primary care paramedic like a million years ago. I had more hair. I was like, it was a different color, but I think just in general, I started with like 5 symptoms. And so I think if you sort of look at numbers of here's the medications and here's the directives. So yes, you can kind of quantify that, but it doesn't necessarily speak to it. I think the bigger challenge is just everything. It's not just paramedicine that's expanded, the complexities in healthcare, the complexities in the workplace, the complexities in the community, it all compounds and it all comes like, I think that's been the biggest. And so, yeah, you can say like, you know, 2002, I had this many, you know, directives and now I have this many. It's a big jump. Through COVID, we heard it a lot is that, you know, paramedics would come in and this is like in early 2020, their whole workplace would be different. Their whole workplace will have shifted how we were doing this and that. And so we started to hear cognitive overload quite a bit.
And so a lot.
I'll talk for myself. So there's been periods where I've had my full-time paramedic job and I've worked part-time at the college. I've worked for the base hospital and I'm doing school. I did a lot of that to myself. Whereas a paramedic who's already say, their career is really important. Their work as a paramedic is really important to them. Their kid's sick. They have aging parents. And so they are coming to work dealing with all this stuff and they don't get an opportunity to select how much more complex their work is getting. And so you have that autonomous piece. And you hear that a lot, I find, with paramedics in that yes, they work alone, but they're very regulated, like in the work that they do. There's a very small window for tolerance. So if a patient or a patient's family member, they have a lot of avenues if they don't like the interaction with the paramedic. And so I think that, you know, not having control over a lot of that is it like in and of itself, it's like stressful and it leads to burnout and all these other factors, or it like intensifies some of the other mental health challenges that paramedics have. So I would just like, if I were to summarize it in one word, it's like that intensification of the work of a paramedic has gotten higher and the expectations of the community in which we deliver this has gotten higher.
Right.
And it's hard to that's hard to cope with, I think, at times. So
how do we fix those issues?
I think it comes back to, it's a shared responsibility. I think that the service can't do that alone. The base hospital, the regulator, can't do that alone. So we just finished our professional development day cycle in York about a week ago. And so, you know, we capture normal feedback. There's a little survey that goes, and one of the questions we put in, or our folks in our professional practice area, they put in kind of a question around I can't remember how the exact wording, but who's responsible for your maintenance of competency or your just ensuring that you have the tools and the knowledge to be a paramedic. And it was a multi-select. And the one thing that jumped out to me is, so some of the folks that did the survey, they kind of clicked, well, the paramedic, like, so me, myself, the base hospital, the regulator, and the service. Some only pick the service. So it is the service's responsibility to make sure that I'm best prepared for the 911 call. And there was a big chunk of folks that picked like the paramedic, but there was a lot that didn't. And so when it comes to that shared responsibility and understanding their the first step is, especially with a lot of the work that we're doing that has been outside of our typical 911, how we're trained responding to cardiac arrests, but we keep adding a lot more around either whether it's through our impact program around more supporting chronic disease management or primary care management, is that identity piece. You need to really take ownership of your own career. You need to take ownership of your own learning, and that no one can do it. But ultimately, my approach has always been, I am most responsible for myself and what I bring to the table. So that would be my not really a solution. But I think that that's the first piece, is people have to see themselves as the professional that they want to be and really use the legal.
I mean, it has to come within, right? It has to come from within. Otherwise, and we talked about this a little bit earlier today, and we talked about the engagement and how do you find satisfaction in the job that you do. And it's important, especially for those paramedics that are 15, 20, 22, 25 years in. How do you stay thrilled to come to work?
Yeah.
Right? And that has to start with yourself. It cannot be York Region has this new program and then suddenly that ignites a flame in me. No, it has to be.
It's a shared, you have to, my opinion, you have to be engaged in yourself as a learner and yourself as a clinician in the work. It has to be meaningful. And for some people, it's not. And so no matter what program, if ultimately, in your career that you're not, it's around having a really good handle on your own mental health and on your own well-being, setting your own goals. Certainly hold the service accountable, hold the base hospital accountable. When we're not meeting our end of the bargain, the ministry, as a regulator, there's pathways to do that accountability piece. But once again, is the magic wand. I would love people to really understand their why and why they keep doing this, and that it actually aligns with the work that they're doing. Because it's if you don't have that satisfaction, you're gonna have bad days and good days. Is this a bad day, or is this years of bad days that maybe this isn't the most fulfilling pathway for me? Because I think that some of that might be making sure you have the right mental health supports in place, making sure that you've done. Because certainly occupational stress injuries can cause some of these things, or they can be a symptom of some of them. But ultimately, evaluating what is your why, what are your goals. You're the only one that can do that for yourself, and that's the only one that can drive your own engagement and your own happiness in your work, right?
And I think it's important to acknowledge that the why can change.
Totally.
Right? 30 years is hefty. So your why can adjust. And it's okay that 5 years from now, you might feel differently and your why, needs to be modified.
Yeah.
Because we're not the same, you are not the same person from 2002.